American Ameritrash component, because you can get all these guys, send them to fight a monster, and they can just all die. In fact, they tend to die a fair amount, but it's a Viking game, so it's okay, because they're all going to Valhalla. And people either find that risk of failure exciting and a nice twist, or they are deeply horrified because they don't like a risk of failure in the European games. They like when they lose that it is either that somebody played better than they did, or that they made some mistakes that are their fault rather than just having bad luck. So, Lords of Waterdeep is probably one of the most popular worker placement games. It has a Dungeons and Dragons theme. You're going around and collecting cubes that represent adventures and then sending them out on quests. You can develop real estate in Waterdeep that adds new worker placement spots, and people have to pay you when they use your spots. And everybody starts with a hidden character, which will help determine their scoring at the end. So everybody has different secret goals, and you don't know what the other people are going for. Whew. I swear I'm not about to have a heart attack. It's just very hot in here. Okay, Village. Recent acquisition, haven't learned it yet. It's a work placement game where you're putting workers out who are generations of a family, and as time passes, they can die. And when they die, they may earn you some more points, but in any case, you can't use them anymore to do stuff. Really intriguing idea. Really looking forward to learning that one. Haven't yet. Okay, so we're taking a break from the worker placement games to move to dice placement games, which I think are a variation on the same theme. In all three of these games, Alien Frontiers, Kingsburg, and Marco Polo, you roll your dice each turn, and then you send them to different places to do work for you. But your options in any given turn are determined by what you rolled on the dice. Kingsburg is more economic. Alien Frontiers is a pretty heavy area control aspect where you're trying to control the most colonies in any given part of a planet to get some benefit. And Marco Polo is very much its own thing. It's awesome. There's kind of movement and trading and all sorts of stuff going on, and each player gets their own unique character at the beginning of the game, and all of these characters have game-breakingly powerful powers. Like I said, you roll your dice at the beginning of each turn to see what you can do. One character doesn't roll dice. They just decide what they have each turn. All the other characters have equivalently powerful abilities, which tells you how wonky this game can get, but somehow it all balances. Really, really cool. Okay. Alright, Dice City is a little bit like Manchikoro. If you've played that, you're managing your city and putting things out, sort of like a game of bingo in a way, to get things to pay off on later rounds. It's on the lighter side, but very good. Role Player, I just got this and learned this recently. It is a game themed with the concept of building your characters before an adventuring trip in, say, Dungeons and Dragons. But it's very puzzly and actually surprisingly thinky. I've had some of the most analysis paralysis I've had in a while playing Role Player, because you're placing dice to do things, but you also need those dice to be particular values at the end of the game, and different colors in different spaces, and you're manipulating your alignment as it shifts around on this board. There's a lot of interconnected parts, so it's one of those games that's fairly simple to teach, but as soon as you understand the ramifications of how everything fits together, it gets very thinky. Whew. Alright, Imperial Settlers. This is one of my favorite games. It's another one of those games where cards can be used in multiple different ways. It's sort of a light civilization game. There are 6 different civilizations that you can choose from if you have all the expansions. It's actually inspired by and then retroactively inspired changes to this post-apocalyptic civilization game called 51st State. They're quite similar, but not as similar as you'd think, and it's worth playing and owning both of them, I think. Then we have Pandemic Central. We have Pandemic Legacy, which I finished, so this box probably needs to go up into the attic. I just haven't done it yet. Really, really good. We have the base Pandemic game with the first 2 expansions. Pandemic's reputation as being a brilliant entry-level cooperative game is well deserved. I think it's superb, and that's why I have various other flavors. We have the Cthulhu version, which is supposed to be a little bit more entry-level. Haven't learned how to play that yet. We've got Iberia, the limited editions Spanish version, which takes place sort of just on the cusp of modern medicine, so you can't actually cure diseases. You're just trying to figure out how to treat them better. Amazing art. Haven't learned how to play it yet. We have Pandemic the Cure, which is the dice game version of Pandemic. Very good, a little bit quicker, highly recommended. Has an expansion that I'm looking to get my hands on, but don't have yet. Alright, we have Cry Havoc, which was another big game from last year. This is a Gen Con copy. A lot of people wanted a Gen Con copy. I have one. I haven't learned how to play it yet. Well, I take that back. I have learned how to play it. I've never actually played it. And I feel really selfish about that, actually. But it's an area control combat game with 4 different factions, each of which plays very differently. It's supposed to be very, very cool. Okay, so I took a break, opened a window, had some water, wondered aloud about my life choices in terms of food consumption and exercise, but I think I'm ready to move on to the next shelf. Forgive me for showing you my feet and legs. I don't really feel like crawling around in front of the camera and making you guys stare at my overlarge stomach, so we're going to do it this way. Hopefully the microphone can pick me up. So, more worker placement games over here. I really like worker placement games. These are by Jamie Stegmaier, the Stronghold games. He also did Scythe. Euphoria is a dystopian worker placement game where your workers are dice. The values on the dice don't mean a ton in terms of what you get when you place them. They do matter. But what's really fun about this is when you take dice back, you often re-roll them. If they get above a certain level, they realize that they're living in a dystopia instead of a utopia, and they abandon you to attempt to escape. Really, really neat game. Very thinky because a lot of things you do may open ways for other players to advance. So there's a certain amount of, if he does this, then I should do this. But if I do that, he'll do this. If you're playing it right, in my opinion, you're actually making those choices specifically to manipulate the other players in specific directions that will ultimately benefit you. Excuse me. Really, really cool game. Highly recommended. There's an expansion hopefully coming out later this year, which I'm super excited about. Then we have Viticulture and Tuscany. Worker placement game and a huge expansion, all having to do with running a winery. I resisted getting Viticulture for the longest time because I find the theme a little dull. I'm not into wineries. It's an incredible worker placement game, and you should absolutely get it, and then you should get Tuscany. Above that, we have Raiders of the North Sea, which is another Viking worker placement game like Champions of Midgard, but it doesn't have any of the randomness, and it's more of a realistic Viking worker placement game in that you're not fighting mythical beasts, you're pillaging your way across another continent in order to bring resources back home and do things with them. It also has little wooden pieces in the shape of cow heads, which is cute. And every time you place a worker to take an action, you also take a worker off and take that worker's action. Haven't actually played this one yet. It looks really cool. Everybody says it's neat. Then we have Spirium, which is a worker placement game where the board is made up of cards, and you place your meeples between cards to option taking actions on them. This one may be going out of print right now. It looks really cool, so I went ahead and got it, but I haven't actually learned it yet. Okay, more worker placement games. This is Coal Baron. Coal Baron is a little drab to look at, and the theme of mining and shipping coal may be a little boring for some. Uh, it does have a really neat mechanism, though, where there's no blocking of spaces, but if you want to go someplace you or somebody else has already gone, you need to spend one more worker than the previous person who went there. So you start each round with a ton of workers, but all the actions are getting progressively more expensive over the course of the round. It's actually a lot of fun. It also has paper money, which is bad. Okay, then we have this giant box, Empire's Age of Discovery, which was originally published as Age of Empires 3. It is a worker placement game with many different types of workers, each of which has their own unique type of plastic figure. And it's about sending out settlers and trading fleets and that sort of thing to the New World and pacifying the natives, which is a little distressing. It has an area control aspect to it where you're trying to have the most settlers in a given space at a given time. It's pretty cool. Giant box. Next to that we have Francis Drake, another worker placement game where you are sending your workers through the city to prepare for your voyages, collecting different resources and special abilities for the second half of the game. And it has a one-way street mechanic, which is basically a rondel, where you're trying to decide if you want to take more actions earlier down on the street or rush ahead to further down the street to get the stuff that you may particularly need. It has cannons, it has combat, but the combat is just spending resources to overcome targets, so it's not really a fighty game. And once you've provisioned for your voyages, then players in secret put out discs controlling the order in which they're going to be traveling to different parts of the map, and then reveal to see who gets to which place first, and then see if they're actually able to achieve what they're going to do there. It's pretty cool. I've only played... The base game starts at 3 players, not 2 players. There's a 2-player expansion, but I don't have it. So I've played a learning game of this, but with sort of a dummy player. It was pretty neat, but I haven't actually played it normally yet. Next we have Istanbul, and I swear this is the last worker placement game. Istanbul, really, really clever game where you're running around the city doing different actions with your merchant, and your merchant has kind of this tower of assistants, and you leave the assistants in various places to do actions there. But you can't, if you run out of assistants, you can't take actions until you go collect assistants or go to the central fountain and call them all back to you. So there's a really interesting spatial element of, you know, how you're going to move around the city and drop people off and pick people up. Really, really cool. Okay. So, next we have 2 Red Raven games. Ryan Lockett does all his own art, game design, and he's also the publisher. City of Iron is one of my favorite games. It has a little bit of a deck builder element, but you're adding so few cards over the course of the game to your deck that it's not really a deck building game. I'm not really entirely sure how to describe the central mechanism of this game. It might be action selection, but it's really neat. It's set in this kind of steampunk world. You're building buildings and establishing outposts and conquering other towns, and there's a little bit of an ability to go after things that other people have conquered, but you can't really mess with each other that much. And ultimately the scoring is all about having access to more of each given resource than other people, with some resources being more valuable than others. Next we have Above and Below. Above and Below is an action selection game where you're a village and you're building buildings, but also sending your villagers down into sort of the Underdark to go on adventures. And there's a storytelling aspect where when you go on an adventure, you look up a tiny little blurb in the book, and it tells you some episode that happened to your adventuring party, and then you make a choice. And based on sort of your party's stats, you find out whether or not you succeeded or not. You can also exhaust party members to make them slightly more effective than they normally would be, at which point they then have to rest before you can do anything with them for a while. And the last time we played, my brother was coming up with all sorts of creative ways. He was goading his villagers to greater feats that somehow involved injuring them in the process. I think threatening to kneecap them was one of the options that he came up with. Okay, then we have In the Name of Odin. There were so many Viking games, and I don't even have Blood Rage, which is the most famous Viking game. In the Name of Odin is a board game with a lot of miniatures that's really a card game. It doesn't feel like it needs the board or the miniatures, actually. It's kind of overproduced. I've learned how to play this one, but I haven't actually played it yet. Whew. Then we have Elysium. Elysium is a... how do I describe this? It's kind of, sort of a deck building game where you're getting cards from the middle, drafting them, and then choosing to use them for their abilities, but at a certain point you need to move them down into your Elysium, your legend, to score them, and each card has different abilities that they can use for and different ways that they score at the end of the game. One really neat thing about this is that there are multiple decks in the box, and you combine a couple of them each time you play the game, and different themed decks will push the game in different directions in terms of the style of play. Whew. Then we have Alchemist. Alchemist is one of my wife's other favorite games. It's an action selection game with a heavy deduction component where you are all alchemists trying to discern the hidden and randomized at the beginning of the game alchemical properties of different ingredients so that you can create potions on demand and publish academic papers about the abilities of each ingredient. It's really cool. It's a pain to teach because you have to teach the game's kind of fake science, and then you have to actually teach the game, which is pretty heavy in its own right, but it's super cool. We got the expansion because it's one of our favorite games, and I haven't actually messed with it much other than reading the rules because it was already a pretty heavy game to begin with, and it seems like every time we play this, we're teaching at least one of the players how to play it, and adding more seems really unfair to them. Next to it, because it's also an alchemy game, but completely on the other side of the complexity spectrum, we have Potion Explosion, which is sort of a mobile-style matching game, I guess is what people would call it now, but in my day, we played Tetris and Columns was better, on our televisions like real people instead of on our phones hunched over in the corner. Dagnabbit. So this has kind of a marble feeder where marbles come down in different rows and you remove them, similarly colored marbles, and then other marbles roll to take their place, and if the matching marbles connect and there's an explosion, you get to take more marbles. You're using those to complete potions, which not only give you points, but can each be drunk for single-use special abilities, so you can chain things together. It's a lot of fun. Then we have Yunnan. Yunnan is, I believe, sort of an auction game. It's about the Chinese tea trade. This was a gift, and I have not gotten around to learning how to play it yet, purely because I find the subject matter fascinating, but it is one of those games that is technically two-player, which is how I tend to learn games, but requires, I think, 2 dummy players if you're going to play it two-player, which is ridiculous, so I haven't learned it yet. Alright, congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. We've made it to the bottom of one